and we have Jon Patrick Holstein from BMR, the editor. Welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on.
Brandon, thank you very much for having me here today.
Hey John, it's Carl here. So I was doing some math, and your subscribers would have had the potential for 35 bagger. That's all thanks to the powerful stock of Garibaldi Resources, GGI. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it? But first, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. We've been running the Bull Market Run site here for about 9 years. I come from a family of geologists, Carl, so rocks are certainly in my DNA, you can say. And I went more in the market direction, but I've always had a love for geology, for the exploration market, for the mining sector since I was a teenager. Started investing in the junior resource sector as a teenager, started following the SK camp, more than 30 years ago when I was much younger. I'm in my early 50s now. So I've been very lucky to be able to spend a lot of time with, through my role at bullmarketrun.com, a lot of time with some great geologists, great geophysicists. I've traveled right across the country. We've been on the front lines of some major new discoveries, of some big district plays. I just got back from a 10-day trip to the Northern Ontario Cobalt Camp. So I love getting my boots on the ground. Our whole team loves doing that. I think that's the best way to do research, and that's why we got so fortunate on Garibaldi last year. That was literally thousands of hours of work researching that story, and it paid off.
Yeah, it did, absolutely. You know what? I always tell my friends, always try to bring in people that are smarter than you. So when it comes to mining, you're definitely a lot smarter than me. And I'm a subscriber. It's paid off. You've made me a lot of money. But let's dig right in here to the Golden Triangle, and more importantly, the significance of the SK camp, and what makes Nickel Mountain tick.
Well, let's take a look first off, Carl, at the big picture. So if our folks there can bring up the map of the Golden Triangle, let's start there for a minute, because the key takeaway here with the Golden Triangle, and this is the SK camp. We'll take a look first at the SK camp here for a minute, and then the bigger picture of the Golden Triangle. The SK camp is very much in the heart of the Golden Triangle. You can see the ENL there, Garibaldi's Nickel Mountain project, right in the heart of one of the richest mineralized districts on the entire planet. You can see the anomaly D there. That's the discovery zone from last year, where they hit over 8% nickel. World-class grades, really in the top 1% of nickel grades anywhere on the planet. And as you can also see, you've got a number of companies involved in the area. This is a big district. It's a big country. I walked a lot of this ground last summer when I was up there for 2 months, actually, in the SK camp. You've got, of course, Colorado over on the western side. You've got Seabridge. They came out with news here today, by the way. You might want to take a look at that. They got great things going on at the Quartz Rise target. You've got Pretium and the Brucejack gold mine, which is one of the richest gold mines anywhere in the world, now in full production. They're going along very nicely. You've got Seabridge's KSM project, the largest reserves of nickel and copper, reserves of gold and copper anywhere in the world. And of course, you got the past SK Creek mine, which Skeena Resources is actually looking at bringing back into production possibly, and the SK mine, which was discovered back in the late 1980s, was one of the richest ore discoveries ever made anywhere on the planet. So, I mean, this is tremendous country, for new discoveries. It's still vastly underexplored, and as Peter Lightfoot has said, Dr. Peter Lightfoot, the idea of a major nickel system in the heart of a gold camp like this makes perfect sense. It's just that BC has not had that history of nickel exploration, so it's not surprising that it took some nickel geologists from Sudbury, when they finally started looking at this thing, to really determine that, hey, the SK camp, very fertile ground for a magmatic nickel sulfide system. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And you know what? I think the juniors are just waiting for a big discovery to ignite the market. That's what we're hoping here for.
We need that. I mean, the junior exploration.
And here's the Golden Triangle, if we can pause here for a sec.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. Now, the big picture here, now just think about this for a minute. This is actually a map from Brixton Metals. There's lots of maps out there on the Golden Triangle. I thought this one was pretty informative, and, you know, they've kind of, you know, extrapolated things a little bit, going, you know, quite far to the northwest. But the Golden Triangle is a huge area, and if you look at the historic production, if you look at the current 43-101 resources in the Golden Triangle, we're talking in excess of 200 million ounces of gold, 1.5 billion ounces of silver, about 80 billion pounds of copper. Just think about those numbers for a minute. I mean, the metal endowment of this region is absolutely incredible, and I think that's, you know, part of the reason why some people actually have a hard time kind of wrapping their heads around some of the discoveries up here and the potential, because it's just so enormous. I mean, those numbers are staggering. This is clearly one of the greatest mineral districts anywhere on the planet. So the idea that it could also host a magnificent nickel copper-rich sulfide system makes perfect sense. The geology is unbelievable. You've got these strike-slip faults that Peter Lightfoot has talked about that create these open spaces. So, you know, you've got incredible endowment here. You've got some incredible deposits, and there's much more to be found. And one thing that really stood out at me last year when I was you know, going through the district, spending a lot of time on the ground. One big advantage here is that you've had a lot of glacial melt. A lot of these glaciers up in the Golden Triangle in the SK camp are receding. That is exposing new mineralization, and that's going to lead to new discoveries. And of course, you're even seeing that up in the Nickel Mountain areas as well, and all throughout the Golden Triangle, which we're seeing here on this map. So the deposits that you see there, the mines that you see there, there's only going to be new mines, new discoveries made, multiple new discoveries in the years ahead, and there's so many factors behind that. And also, one of the key things is now too, you've got great infrastructure that has moved into parts of the Golden Triangle. The SK camp being no exception. Probably well in excess of $1 billion has been poured into infrastructure in the SK camp in the last few years, and I think God just created, you know, the SK camp for mining. I mean, it's just an ideal setting. You've got great geology there. You don't have really any major environmental concerns, no significant First Nations issues. The First Nations are completely on board. There's no history of First Nations involvement in this area. So it's kind of, you know, protected, I guess, from some of those risk factors that we see play out in the mining sector so often. So it's really a very special part of the world for exploration and mining. I don't think it matters what government is in power in BC. Yes,
it's a go. It's a go.
we got John Horgan and Wacky Weaver running BC right now. It's not a great scenario. Parts of BC, I think, you know, have become more risky for mining and exploration, obviously because of the government. But the SK camp, I think, is fully insulated from that risk. I really believe that. You've got the First Nations totally on board. I mean, if you're up there, if you're on the ground, and you'll see what I mean. I mean, there's no communities anywhere around there. It was made for mining, and that's why some of these projects have come into being so quickly. The SK Creek mine very quickly went into production. KSM has all of its permitting. Bruce Jack came into production very quickly, so it's easy to move projects forward here, and that's a big advantage for Garibaldi. And the other big advantage for Garibaldi, hey, we're in the electric vehicle revolution right now with the interest.
Absolutely,
absolutely. What better project to have up there right now than something that fits perfectly into the demand that we're going to see here for for nickel and cobalt with the electric vehicle revolution and what's happening in the battery sector. So it's just unbelievable timing on the part of Garibaldi to make the discovery.
Jon, I gotta ask you. Last year we were in the Blue Sky event. All of the speculators piled in. It was the best story in mining, in my opinion, last year. I think the numbers would back that up. Why is GGI taking so long with the news release? I think it's because they need to ignite the market. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's a bit ironic, actually, Carl, because I mean, last year you had some people criticizing Garibaldi for being over promotional. Now some of those same people are saying, "Oh, they're not coming out with any news. You know, something must be wrong." You can't have it both ways, right? I mean, I think the circumstances are much different. I mean, last year, Garibaldi started drilling Nickel Mountain with, very little money in its treasury. I mean, I think at certain times over the spring, they may have had trouble even paying their light bill, and then things magically came together, and they knew they were onto something very quick, something big, and they had to obviously get some more money raised, and they did that very successfully. You can't raise money if you're not saying anything. I think this year the focus this summer has definitely been like a laser beam focus on exploration. Everybody there at Garibaldi is just focused on proving out this deposit. Building tonnage. Obviously, we know the grades are there. These are incredible grades of nickel. They got to build out tonnage, and they're focused like a laser beam on that. So I think last year it was about 3 months from the time Garibaldi first started drilling to when we saw actual assay results. I think we're probably going to see the same thing this time around. And keep in mind, the assaying procedure here is somewhat complicated. You've got 7 different metals. You've got a lot of high-grade rechecks that always have to be done here. So I think it's actually a good sign that they haven't reported anything yet. But I'm sure we'll hear from them soon enough.
Absolutely. So yeah, you're suggesting that if they had high-grade assays, they'd have to be rechecked, which would throw us off time-wise. But also, what do you think's cracked the code here? Is it the geophysics? Because I know Warren Irwin had some comments in regards to that. He's a pretty smart guy,
He is, and Warren did a lot of research actually, prior to the big discovery of Noront. So he certainly knows what he's talking about. Very, very bright guy, and he's a big believer in geophysics. That's obviously a powerful driver of the situation at Nickel Mountain. You got to follow the geology, but you also have to follow the geophysics. And the advances in technology recently have been truly amazing. And what LaMontagne can do in terms of borehole EM is incredible. You drill a hole and you can basically detect these conductors which lead you into the massive sulfides. So the geophysics is really your eyes underground and also above ground. And the massive sulfides obviously are connected electrically, right? So disseminated sulfides will not pick up on borehole EM. They're not electrically connected, kind of like those old Christmas lights. If one bulb is out, they're all out. But with the massive sulfides, they're connected, and they do pick up with these plates and conductors. So that is a great way to vector in to the massive sulfides. You follow that trail of massive sulfides, ultimately, it should lead to the feeder zone here in this system. One thing about this district, Carl, we talked about how prolific it is. You know, but it is still very challenging exploration. I mean, it's, you know, people have to keep in mind up at Nickel Mountain, you know, at this time of the year, it may be sunny and hot, you know, where we are, but, you know, you can get snow up there even at this time of the year. I mean, conditions are incredibly variable. It can be dangerous, you know, flying up there, walking around up there. The glaciers create their own weather. It is incredibly challenging exploration. I'm sure there have been stretches of, you know, 3-4 days when Garibaldi this summer, like last summer, has not even been able to drill. You know, it can get that challenging up there, and the geology can be complex. You know, so it does take a little bit of time, just like it did with Eskay Creek, just like it did, you know, with some of these other deposits in the camp. But they're there, and they're waiting to be found. And you know, I think we got some really tremendous excitement coming up here in this district in the month of September.
So we have arguably Canada's biggest mining speculator, Eric Sprott, on board. You've got Warren Irwin on board. We've got you on board with all of your history and your experience up there. And then we've got Lightfoot on board, and he's compared some of the rocks to Norilsk, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. Is that accurate?
It is, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty insane. You know, that's why I'm heavily invested in this.
Let's have our crews actually bring up a picture of Peter Lightfoot. We have a picture of him holding up some rocks from Nickel Mountain. We can talk about that just for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, we'll throw those up in the background. There's 8 or 12 of them. We'll throw them up slowly so people can start seeing.
Yeah, we like looking at John, but we like rocks.
Yeah, so anywhere else, that'd be very strange.
There he is.
Here's a shot of drilling last summer at Nickel Mountain. Now here's Peter. You can see Peter here holding up a couple of rock samples. This was before drilling actually started last summer, and you know, Peter was like a kid in a candy shop. You know, I mean, he was doing some prospecting and found these samples, and these rocks here are classic, typical nickel sulfide rocks that you see in some of the greatest deposits around the world. You've got that chaotic nature of the rocks that Peter likes to talk about. Here's Jeremy Hansen in front of the massive sulfide outcrop at Nickel Mountain. So this was actually a key point. You know, when Jeremy did some channel sampling at the ENL at Nickel Mountain in 2016, they did a nickel tenor analysis. And nickel tenor was not something that was known back in the 1960s when they were first running around Nickel Mountain and making some interesting nickel finds. But the nickel tenor is really key, and the nickel tenor at Nickel Mountain, and the tenor is basically the metal content in 100% sulfide. And the nickel tenor at Nickel Mountain here is ranging anywhere from 4.8% to above 8%. So that analysis of nickel tenor from Jeremy's channel sampling in 2016 from the massive sulfide outcrop at Nickel Mountain really got this project going. That was the first indication that Garibaldi could be onto something big, establishing that nickel tenor. And that nickel tenor has been consistent all the way through. So you know, you've got the classic textures, the loop textured massive sulfides here, the axidic olivine gabbro, the orbicular variable textured olivine gabbro in these rocks. And so this is classic nickel sulfide material. And now the challenge is you know, to prove up the tonnage and to turn this into a mine. And there have been, you know, we've talked about some of the detractors. There's a shot there, a nice rainbow, probably a good luck sign. A rainbow.
Follow it.
That was actually from Thunder North, a little bit, or from Thunder South, actually, I think, a little bit south of Nickel Mountain. You can see the cone there. That's a separate geological event from the Nickel Mountain nickel phase. but the cone is quite interesting. It's quite a fascinating feature, and that marks the boundary between the Metalis property and the Garibaldi property. And as we took that picture, this rainbow appeared. I thought that was a pretty good sign.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
John, we're actually out of time.
Yeah.
But I have a saying, and now that I'm staring at it, there must be a lot of nickel in that mountain. So we're gonna have to let you loose here. But this was a lot of fun, and we didn't even get to CCW today. Can I get your word that you'll come on and join us again, and we'll talk about Garibaldi and we'll talk about CCW?
Oh, absolutely. We love these district plays. We're going to see a lot of excitement, Carl, in the SK camp and the Northern Ontario Cobalt camp led by Canada Cobalt. Lots of fascinating stuff happening there. So for sure, I'm available anytime you like.
All right.
I'd love to.
Perfect. I'd like that as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you.
Okay. All the best.
Yeah, always a pleasure.